Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And as Diane read from book one, I think Mr. Kesh fully knows what was to come when he wrote book number one, let's say. So we're very privileged and humbled and blessed to be here, that we've been touched by this knowledge, and we're hungry to absorb more of it. And I think Alex's teaching are helping us to do that. So we want to bring in Alex now from Canada and give him a loud round of applause through our souls. You may not hear anything, but I think he'll feel something. Our appreciation for him consistently being here and delivering a teaching and understanding, even if we only take a small part of what we can understand from it, it all adds to the knowledge, and this knowledge is endless. I'm sure Alex can confirm that. So welcome, Alex. Would you like to take the screen? There we go. There it is, a beautiful purple flower.
And good day to you. And I'm having some technical issues. Just one moment, please.
Yeah, no, when nobody's on the spot here, we're all very patient. And if we have glitches, which we do from time to time, we just work through them. We work with what we have.
Please advise if audio and video is okay.
Check, check.
Okay, just one moment. I just have to do the other system. One moment, please.
Yeah. So perhaps the Christmas time is going to be a time for moving knowledge seekers around the planet. Perhaps a couple of them or more of them. Mr. Kesh said we've done this in the past, and that may be something that's going to be on the card coming up in the next, gosh, it's almost the end of November already. So 2022 has moved on. I know he indicated by the end of 2022, we would not remember all the bad things that happened in 2021. And it certainly looks like we're moving, especially with this mobile processing. It's just unbelievable that they can touch things that man has only had a very small fraction of success with, and some no success at all. They may tell you to try this pill or that pill, but it's mostly trial and error. They have really no concept of the construction and where the problem or the diagnosis is. As Mr. Kesh said, we're not going to rely on the diagnosis of man. Alex, are we back up to 100%?
You know what? I just can't believe it. I installed a new system last week and it is working.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it just disappeared from the system.
I'm in shock. After 6 weeks of grief.
It is a nice thing when everything goes smoothly, isn't it?
Oh, is it ever? Is it ever? And, after yesterday's massive snowstorm here, you can't believe it. The streets are plowed and the sun is shining. And my sunroom is very sunny. And the temperature there is way above room temperature, so the plants are loving it. And so I want to thank everybody for being patient with me and allowing us to make this presentation today. And
you got a foot of snow, Alex. To Canadians, that's like getting an inch, isn't it? I mean, for us Americans.
No, it's for you guys in Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
I was in Atlanta when the snow started to fall, and I had to get out of Atlanta real quick. It was dangerous. You guys don't know how to drive in snow. Anyway,
thank you.
We're not much better. The police just told me that over the weekend they've fined 36 people for drinking and driving, and the fines here are just unbelievable. And so to be caught drinking and driving is unbelievable. I mean, it affects your livelihood. And don't we have enough pressure on our livelihood as it is without being delinquents ourselves? But this is what we want to talk about. So I want to welcome everybody here to the KAKT Foundation. We're learning about Marin Tavakkoli Kesh's technology that he's brought forward. And you're spending valuable time today with us, and I just want to say that I appreciate that for those who've been here today, and also for those who will be here in the future, because this is the future. And as such, this is the KAKT Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We're at the intermediate EARTHSPACE level. We're going to discuss the speed of rotation today. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is November the 20th, 2022. This is the KAKT Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. And as we started back over 2 years ago, we've passed our second anniversary here with these public classes. And we have broken it down into basic, intermediate, and advanced, but please understand that all of this is really, really basic as we're trying to keep up with Mr. Kesh and the advancing technology. And we see that there's a tremendous urgency that is going on this planet because there's way too much suffering. And we have all seen now that not only is it needless, but it's pointless. And so the speed of rotation is accelerating. And so that's what we want to talk about today. And we'll see how does that fit, with everything that we talked about, because we have talked about rotation in the past, but I want to focus on the spinning aspect, because we're all looking for that piece of that spinning pie in the sky. And this is our path to search for outer space. And that is the culmination that has started with the 3 books, The Universal Order of Creation of Matters, which brings all the matters together. And so we say that's the source, but really, our soul is the source. And that goes back to the origin of the universe. So somehow between the source of this matter state and the source of the universe is a link. And so that is the structure of light. And our understanding of the structure of light puts a limit on our knowledge. And so many times we can't see all the things that we want to see. And so this pie in the sky is kind of a phantom pie, isn't it? We only dream about it, and we haven't fully explained our dreams either. But as we know, a phantom is something that is apparent to the senses, but with no substantial existence. And we've come to the point where some people don't even want to acknowledge their senses. And this is a problem. It's a problem for them, actually. So we do know that we can send satellites into the sky and that they orbit the Earth, but we can't see the path that they follow. And then we can take these satellites and become spaceships, and we can't see the path that they follow. And then we can also dream as satellites, and we can't see the path that we follow. And so the question then becomes, which dimension is the reality dimension? Because clearly we have a physical dimension, but it doesn't satisfactorily explain other things. So are those other things the reality dimension? And so one of the factors in this whole process is that there is a rotation. And we know that because the sun comes up every day, and it's sun rises and sun sets, and then we have a moonrise and a moon set, and we see the zodiac moving in the sky. And you know, we have to wonder about the direction of rotation sometimes, and we're going to discuss more of that later. But this week we're just going to talk about the speed, because the speed has a serious effect. And so if we were to rotate with the planet, we would be kind of busy. But we have this sentimental attraction to this particular pie in the sky, which we call Earth. And we can't see the track that the Earth follows, but what we do know is that it is between Venus and between Mars. So somewhere in between, we have our own flat plane that we rotate on. And all the other planets are doing the same thing. So this is the characteristic of all planets, that they all have some kind of rotation as a sphere, but they rotate on a plane around the sun. So we've concluded in a previous episode that the real reality dimension that we're seeking, which is outer space, of course, that outer space is not a place, but it's a method of energy transfer. And so we keep going back to the same thing. Energy transfer is representative of energy in motion. And so last week we talked about transition energy through the poles. And we see that poles are perpendicular to the surface of the Earth. But today we're going to talk about the energy transmission that follows the surface of the Earth. And so the surface of the Earth rotates around the polar axis, and that rotation facilitates transmission. So we see that we talked about the compass settings. So we have a North Pole, and that is the main rotating axis. But we also have a magnetic pole. And physically, we don't rotate around that one. But what we do is we do have a wobble. And the North Pole doesn't necessarily wobble. The magnetic pole does wobble. But what is important is this gap in between, because this gap is changeable. And the changeability of this gap is actually affected by the speed of rotation. And the significance of the rotation you see, because in this picture, the gap is, let's say, in the North Pole on one side. And we see that as the rotation of the Earth rotates around the North Pole axis, that the magnetical pole will also rotate. And so this contributes more to the wobble. And we asked last week, is the pole wobble the heartbeat? And it probably is. But the Earth's rotation rotates around the North Pole axis and takes the magnetic pole along with it. So does the speed of rotation make a difference? or does the speed of rotation contribute to the wobble? So when we're looking at the rotation of the field, we're talking about the y-axis. That's the North Pole. And when we're talking about the transmission, we're talking about the x-axis. And so these are two different planes in two different directions. And so what we're saying is that the Earth's rotation affects the relationship of these poles. So if the magnetic pole is not aligned with the North Pole, then we now have a double gap. Depending on the point of rotation, there might be a gap on one side, and then later on there'll be a gap on the other side. And of course, this happens every single day. And then this whole picture then also rotates around the sun. So we're just going to talk about Earth's rotation right now. I would like to introduce briefly a topic about Eric Laithwaite. He was a British electrical engineer, and he was a professor at the Imperial College, and of course he was British. And he was known as the father of the maglev. Also, he developed linear induction motors and the maglev rail system. And he was invited one day to speak at the Royal Institute in 1974, which is an extremely prestigious engineering fraternity. And that ended his career because right after that speech, he was discredited, his speech was disavowed, and the technology was buried following his speech. And so it's interesting to look at this history because history tends to repeat itself, but there's a classic difference between what happened in 1974 and what is happening today. You see, the problem with Mr. Laithwaite was that he was British. Had he been American, as you know, in Missouri, seeing is believing. And so that's the problem. This engineering fraternity in England saw his physical demonstrations and they didn't believe it. Or maybe they refused to believe it. So if you don't believe what you see in physicality, I think we can understand some of the problems that we have with the plasma science because it's non-visible, non-tangible. However, it is far more powerful, and this is something that we as knowledge seekers have to convey to the new knowledge seekers. And when we define plasma, we have to understand that there are different kinds of energy states, and the plasma state is a very high energy state, but it is not only in one single energy state. There are many other energy states, but for simplicity purposes, we've broken them down into matter state of physicality, nano state of physicality, GAN state of physicality, and plasma states could be plasmatic, could be physical. So all of this is part of, depending on our point of view and contributing to our understanding of our Earth space. It is enhancing our understanding of Earth space that allows us to find our inner space, because this is important. This is the key to the gateway to outer space. And if it's not important, then nothing is important. So to review some plasma rules, it's important to restate this because energy states increase or decrease by at least an order of magnitude. So the change of the state is extremely significant. It isn't one step, it's 10 steps at a time. And the higher energy state feeds the lower energy state. That's a very important rule, quite different from the way we do things in the physical matter state. And these energy states can manifest. And so they either manifest through natural creation or natural decay, which means it's either increasing or decreasing. But if it maintains its non-consuming persona, then that energy transfer is catalytic. And the best example of that is our friend the sun. It comes up every day and gives us energy unconditionally, and then leaves and allows us to consume that energy, and then comes back the next day and does the same thing all over again. And we don't have to pay for it, and we don't have to be terrorized, wondering if it's going to show up. And some of us at one time would sit and wait for the sun to come up and cheer because the sun came up. But it is reliable. And as I mentioned, the two most important things about scientific discovery is reliability and consistency. And the Keshe Foundation has been very, very consistent. And so we see that these transfer rates are also higher in the higher plasma states. And what's important about that is that the transfer rates are done also by many orders of magnitude in these higher plasma states. So the efficiency increases. The characteristics of plasma are that it absorbs fields or is a barrier of fields. So in other words, the plasma is making some choices. And the criteria for making those choices is literally bound to the ethos of the universe. But in our physicality, we like to, shall we say, make new rules. And so why I'm discussing the speed of rotation today is because energy can only be held in the field. So that energy cannot change its speed and cannot be stopped. So in order to catch that energy, we have to put it somewhere where it can keep going. And so we can put that energy in a field. And that field manifests from rotation. And the speed of rotation affects the field strength. And so this becomes the important factor. What is the field strength? Because we want to know about the higher energy state and the lower energy state. And what constitutes a higher energy state is that it has a higher field strength. So the higher field strength is accommodated for by the field relations. So different fields rotate at different speeds. In fact, they even rotate in different directions. And this affects the field strength. And we don't have to go step by step. The energy state changes can transcend multiple energy states. So you want to leap up 2 steps or 3 steps or 10 steps, you can do so. But you have to ramp up your field strength in order to be able to do that. And so now we understand when we say the creation of the universe is from energy. It exists from energy. And that energy is always in motion. And so the way it moves is called a charge in motion. But if it's going to move, it has to move somewhere. So it has to have a relationship. And that's why all things are in combination. We didn't say how many things in combination. And we didn't say what field strength. What we are saying is that combinations of plasma fields and combination of plasma fields and physical manifestation fields are also working in combination. And this is a dynamic process. And we are dynamic people. We have our own space. And we have our own fields. And we have our own energy fields. And so these fields are rotating within us. But we don't feel that rotation. All we're seeing is the manifestation in our physicality. And we have to understand that the manifestation of our physicality is dependent on the manifestation of the environment. And so our environment is Earth space. And it's the Earth space that does the rotating. If we were doing the rotating, we'd get very dizzy. And we don't feel dizzy on the Earth space. We're a part of that Earth space. But that rotation creates a gravitational effect. And this is a good thing because that allows us to ride the Earth space and stay on it and rotate with it. And this field of Earth space extends right up into moon space because moon space does the same thing. It rotates along with the Earth. And it rotates on its own orbit. And you say, well, you know, the moon comes up at night and goes away in the morning, and the sun comes up in the morning and goes away at night. So the Earth was originally deemed to be the center of the universe because we couldn't differentiate between the quality of the rotation of the moon space around the Earth space and the quality of the Earth space rotating around the sun space. All we have seen is that the moon and the sun are rotating one way and the Earth space is rotating the other way, and we couldn't decide which one was rotating. But now we know. The Earth space is doing the rotating around the sun, and the moon space is doing the rotating around the Earth, and the man space is happily going along for the ride. So now we get to the fundamental principle of the twinity here, because we have two fields, and they have a relationship. But that relationship manifests itself as a single atom. So the atom is a combination of the proton and the electron. And so the speed of rotation of the plasma of the electron is actually dictated by the amount of the magnetic fields which are transferred from the large twin plasma. So the large twin plasma of the proton is a higher field strength than that of the electron. And this creates a balanced condition. Well, how is that possible? The proton is 1,849 times larger than the electron. And if you were sitting on a teeter-totter with someone who was 1,849 times heavier than you, well, you would not enjoy the game. You'd be hanging in the air. And so this is what the problem is. You see, we can't see these fields. And unlike Eric Lathway, he could see the manifestation of these fields, and he tried to show that. And the engineers saw that, but they didn't believe it. Well, we got a real problem here because we're now releasing energy in the transformation from the neutron to the atom, which we are saying here, in this case, is a proton-electron combination. And the difference is the release of PM ticks, which we can't see them either. So we actually now have, in this picture, 4 rotating fields. And clearly, these fields are not at the same size. And if they're not at the same size, does that mean they're not of the same field strength? Or does it mean that there's other criteria, a common denominator, a connection? And in the plasma science, you only have to have a part of that connection, because all things working in combination, you see. What you are is part of your emission. And what you're creating is part of your absorption. And what you're transmitting is what you create from those two fields: an emission field, an absorption field, and the PMTX field, the field of creation. And so there are references. And we didn't say if these references are plasmatic or physical. The rules are the same, except for one small little detail, and that's field strength. The physical is the lowest energy state, and for too many of us, that's all we see. So what we see is the physicality spectrum, and what we don't see is the plasmatic spectrum that supports this physicality spectrum. And what we also don't see is the connection between the plasmatic spectrum and the physicality spectrum. That's the reality dimension, that connection. And it doesn't just connect the plasmatic to the physicality, but it connects the earth to the sun and us to the earth. And us to the environment and all the inhabitants of the environment. And this is all done from energy in motion. And this energy in motion has to come in packets of energy, which you can't grab onto. And they're coming throughout the entire universe. And they transcend the various reality dimensions. And which reality dimension are we talking about? The one where you are. That's your reality dimension. You are where you are. And we're on Earth. And all of us have come here. And we've come from different places. And we've come into the atmosphere and brought our variety. But we all came here with the same energy. The dream energy of the spirit manifesting the default soul energy of our existence. And it all follows the same rules. The higher strength feeds the weaker strength. And so these are the basic magnetical principles of attraction and repulsion. And we've all seen magnets, and Eric Lathwaite demonstrated magnets and the attraction and repulsion, and was rejected. In other words, he was repulsed because what he was talking about was not attractive. So what we had seen in that presentation in 1974 was clearly a magnetical repulsion and no gravitational interaction at all. And it's too bad for humanity. It set us back 50 years. And so that's the feedback. So it's entirely possible to get a completely magnetical reaction. It's possible to get a completely gravitational reaction. But for the majority of cases, it's a combination of the two. And when the two are in balance, then that's a maggrav. So when we have a maggrav, that's the coming together of all of these energy parceling units into this plasmagen conversions, and it converts to a plasma maggrav or a physical maggrav. So the plasma maggrav consists of the principal matter, transition matter, and convergence matter. And that now represents one field. And that field rotates. It has to rotate because the antimatter is far stronger than the dark matter, and the dark matter is far stronger than the matter. And so the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. But here you have a convergence of three different energy states in one energy state. And so the feedback of that energy state becomes this plasmagen state, but that's on its own. It needs to have a relationship, and that field is rotating, and we don't know how fast it's rotating. We can only interact with our environment. It's only then that we can see what the feedback is. And that interaction is called inertia. That's the field interaction. So we understand that we came to Earth, right? We didn't come to Mars. And so the field interaction of inertia is between our maggrav field, which is man space, and Earth's maggrav field, which is Earth space. So we have an ability to manipulate these field strengths. So obviously we need to be able to turn it on and turn it off. And obviously we need to be able to increase or decrease. And then it changes our position. And so we can either enhance our position or diminish our position. But it's not to say, when we say diminish our position, to be weaker or submissive. It's a different position. So it's a relative field strength. So you can be the stronger field strength, or you can be the weaker field strength. And so what does that differentiate? That differentiates between the giving and taking. But what we have to understand is that this giving and taking creates the maggrav condition. And that becomes a balanced condition, as we've said, and is non-visible. So what is the difference? And that's a good question. The difference is whether it's magnetical or gravitational. And the only way that you can know that is by interacting with another field. So our self-enhancement is interacting with the universal energy. And so the universal energy is stronger. So our self-enhancement is harvesting from the universe. The Loosh harvesting, which is man's way of harvesting on this planet, is harvesting from the weakest. It's stealing from others. And because it's such a weak energy, it's inadequate. The field strength is inadequate. And so to supplement it and maintain that energy, this Loosh harvesting leads to self-consumption. So what are we doing? Well, what we're doing is the same thing we've been doing for the last 12,000 years. We're bringing things together and we're looking at them, and we don't know what we see. We don't know if it's a flash, a glow, or a glitter. All we care about is if it's profitable. And so with the profitability is what we account for, and everything else we discount as if it doesn't matter. But of course it matters, because whatever you're accounting for is a byproduct of what you've been discounting. And so when we look at our biosphere dimension and we say, well, within this dimension, we have done something incredible. We have created some ganses like zinc GANs and CO2 GANs. But we put that in a glass bottle, which is very physical, and the GANs is in there, and there's a hole in the GANs. And that GANs didn't disappear, it was displaced to the side because of the field rotation. And so we can't see what caused the hole in the center, but we can see that it's round. And we can see that this is a byproduct of the feeding system, which means the feedback is a rotating field and is a byproduct of the feeding system. And you need to see that. You need to see that. And the proof of concept is to work with that, not to ignore it, not to dismiss it. And so when we got the cups of life, it became a matter of life and death. And we were able to create ganses inside the cups. And these ganses affected our life. And we produced GANs from thin air. We produced CO2 GANs, calcium GANs, zinc GANs, copper GANs, amino acid GANs, and water GANs. The water in the cup of life is not the same water that you get out of your tap. It's a plasmatic water. And you say, well, the water that I get out of my tap is a byproduct of the interaction with the earth. And so we had the cup of inertia to help us interact with the earth. And then, of course, the cup of earth represented the earth's fields. And all of these fields had the same thing. They had a magnetical field and a gravitational field, and they all have a soul. And collectively together, all of them have a soul. So in other words, individually, they have all three field strengths, and collectively, they have all three field strengths. And so this cup of soul, which represents the cup of soul of man, the emotion of man, and the physicality of man, interacts with the earth space, and that interaction is another field, the inertia field. And so that inertia field is the byproduct of our interaction with this environment. And so we are part of the feeding system of the planet. And the planet is rotating. And we're along for the ride. How cool is that? So when we talked about last week, the polar energy, that was reflective of the emission and absorption spectrum. But this week we're talking about the rotation energy, and the rotation energy affects the speed and the strength of the field. And it is part of the transmission spectrum, whereas the polar energy is part of the transition spectrum. And so both of them work together, and there's the relationship. There's the relationship. So you look at the electron component, and you see that it's magnetical, and it has poles, and it has rotation. And the electron component is an amalgamation of three different fields of antimatter, dark matter, and matter. And this is also representative of the PM ticks. But the electron is also a component in the atom, along with the proton. And so we say that the electron has a rotating field. The proton also has a rotating field. But because the two are working together, they have to rotate in combination. And I've made a mistake. One moment, please. Let me correct that mistake. I guess you'll see the mistake. So,
Is that the rotation?
yes, sir. Oh, well, just a moment. We're doing some pole flipping here. Okay. If they're rotating in opposite directions, then you have compatibility. If they're operating in opposite directions, then you have friction. Well, wait a second here. Just a moment. The Earth has hemispheric rotation. And the rule of thumb is, if you're standing on the pole and looking down at the Earth, you take your left hand and sweep it across your body and pull it back to the left. That represents a counterclockwise rotation. But if you look all the way through to the southern hemisphere, you'll find that it goes in the opposite direction. So we discussed this in the past. But because this is an earthbound field strength, these are two fields that are working together. So really, if you go on the South Pole and you do the same thing and you look down at the South Pole, you will see that it also rotates in a counterclockwise direction. So we have an anomaly. The two hemispheres are rotating in opposite directions, and there's, should be some kind of friction, but the Earth is rotating in one direction, and it's both north and south hemispheres are rotating in the same direction. So we see that the Earth-space rotation is a physical manifestation of the interaction of these fields. So the interaction of these fields is, of course, it's the inertia, isn't it? The Earth-space rotation is a manifestation of the inertia field, which is a combination of the hemispheric rotating fields. There we go. And so we see that all things work in combination, but not only. The energy in motion is also going on a two-way street. And so that's why the two poles are going in opposite directions, you see. And so the thing is that the North Pole is considered the emission pole. So what that means is the North Pole is slightly stronger than the South Pole, because the South Pole is considered the absorption pole. But when we look at the principal interaction, we see that the South Pole also has an emission, and the North Pole also has an absorption. So this two-way street is the Maggrav condition. The additional energy, which defines whether it's magnetical or gravitational, is the residue. And so the residue of the Earth is that the North Pole is the emission pole. And what is complementing that is a similar structure from another atom. And when you have two atoms that have a common denominator, then you have an interaction. So the Earth space has a common denominator with the rest of the universe. And so this is the binding of energy into this Maggrav condition we call Earth space, and the manifestation of the physicality of Earth space. And so the energy is being absorbed, it is being attracted. And we call this the binding energy paths. And they don't just come in on the gravitational pole, but they come in through the various points dependent on the field rotation. And so this field rotation has a speed, and so it has a field strength, and it is that field strength which is attracting other energies. And what are those other energies? Well, of course, they're the PM ticks, aren't they? And so to attract more PM ticks, to attract more PM ticks and to increase field strength, we have to emit, to make room for, to accommodate. And so in that process, we are now elevating energy because we're giving. We haven't decided who we're giving to, we're just saying that we're giving. So it's up to the receiver to decide whether they absorb or they create a barrier of these plasma fields. But as we emit, then we're able to absorb more. And so this is an ongoing process, and it has to be that because energy is always in motion. We can't stop it, so it has to keep rotating. And if we didn't emit anything, then we would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. But what happens, two things happen. One is that the rotation becomes more stable, becomes stronger, and the creation continues. If we didn't emit, then the field itself would get bigger. And so that would require more energy to maintain it. What determines the field strength? So the speed of rotation determines the field strength, but the position of that field is not an island. If you remember, it's between Venus and Mars, and it has a direct relationship with the sun in the solar system. But not only, and we'll talk about that more at another time, because we have a soul spectrum that is a combination of the dilution of all the plasma fields. And it is from that soul spectrum that is attracting the absorption. And as such, we are emitting that soul spectrum. And so that becomes our radiance. But that radiance is actually a feeding energy. And it's a feeding radiance energy of the plasmatic manifestation that has created our dynamic plasma field. And so there has to be a relationship because we have to have a feedback. So we have a horizontal transmission, vertical transition, horizontal transmission. And that horizontal transmission goes around. There's a rotating field. And so we have a North Pole, northern hemisphere that's rotating in one direction and a southern hemisphere rotating in another direction. But the two of them work together in a horizontal transmission, which allows us to further manifest into physicality. And it would be quite something if both of these hemispheres would manifest into the physicality, because there'd be a whole lot of grinding going on at the equator. And we already have enough conflict on this planet. We need to eliminate conflict. And so we need to understand that the two hemispheres are working together with the two poles that we have and creating a condition where all of these are working together in combination, and they manifest themselves into a physicality. A choice was made to manifest it into a physicality. And so if it had been totally symmetrical, then it would have been a MAGRAV and have been non-visible, non-tangible, completely, and in fact stationary. But then life doesn't work like that. That life is constantly in motion, so the MAGRAV is constantly rotating, and as such, it is moving, and as such, it is repositioning, and as such, things change. Things change. And so the question is not just what causes the change, but can we predetermine the change? So we know for a fact, 100% clear, that we can manifest a change in our physicality. Science has proven that. But what science can't get its head around is things that it can't prove. And if it can't see it, by definition, it can't prove it. So the scientific community has a real bind. And the spiritual community fills that gap. But the spiritual community totally ignores the science. And so there's a merit to the spiritual community and there's a merit to the scientific community. And when we put the two together, we find that this manifests into the plasma science, and it affects the change. It affects the knowledge. And then the question then becomes, is at what rate do we change this? And so if we can get the speed of rotation at a higher level, this would allow us to fulfill our choices. We made choices when we got here because it didn't happen by accident. There was a principal interaction with all of these fields. And so the emission from the North Pole is absorbed in the South Pole and vice versa. And all that we can account for is this residue. We discount for the two-way street. And that's fine, because what we're looking for is the transmission between the two fields. The transmission between the two fields is part of the connection. So the transition of energy states affects the field strength and affects the speed of rotation. And the transmission and the clarity of the transmission is determined by the speed of rotation. And so those are the two factors that we're looking at, the feeding radiance and the feedback radiance. And so when we look at two fields, the transmission of energy between those two fields is a reality dimension, because that's what we are emitting. And if there's an agreement, that's what they are absorbing. And so that becomes the significance, the significant dimension. And the significant dimension is the reality dimension. And if we're traveling through outer space, we need to travel through this significant dimension. So the part that we're not talking about is the soul, because the soul of the man is the essential you. And that is the interaction between the plasma state and the matter state. It is also the interaction between the plasmagen state and the mattergen state. It's the soul of the body that's a surrogate you. That represents the interaction between the plasmagen state and the environment state. So both are interacting with the physicality. It's just that the soul of the body is a surrogate, is an intermediary, a proxy, if you will. But in all cases, there's a manifestation. The plasma feeding is what leads to this manifestation. And so that manifestation could be non-tangible or tangible, non-visible or visible. And so that differentiates between the plasmatic reality and the physical reality. But there's another reality that we haven't talked about, and that's the emotion of presence. It's a non-visible reality, but it sure does affect the physical reality. And so the emotion of presence also becomes a foreign artifact of energy and motion. And it becomes a foreign artifact at that manifestation point. So if you have an emotional field and a physical field and nothing happens, then you don't have a manifestation point. And that's the difference between the physical state, which you can touch and you can see, and the non-physical state, which you can't touch and you can't see. And the problem for us as humanity is that we have chosen a dominant matter state. And we've chosen the weakest one as our dominant matter state. But the good news is that we have a common denominator to our higher states. And so that's part of the learning, you see. So as man space, we see that we have two souls, two emotions, and two physicalities. And as Earth space, we found two emotions, two physicalities represented by the two poles. And now we see that the inertia, the interaction, has two hemispheres. And there's a common denominator, the speed of rotation. Who determined the speed of rotation? So it has to do with the soul of the earth relationships, doesn't it? So when we're looking at the outer space, that has a relationship to the soul of the sun, the soul of the man, the soul of the earth. And then the inner space has to do with the soul of the body. So we have a body, the earth has a body. So the soul of the earth body and the soul of the body operate the same way. And then the earth space, which is the physicality of the earth body. And so the physicality of the earth body responds to the emotional and physical fields to manifest the physicality of the body, and you choose which body you want to manifest. And we'll talk about that more next week. So fundamentally, there's a soul sequencing. And so to understand this sequencing explains a lot, because two fields manifest into one field. So the soul of the solar system plus the soul of the sun is what attracted the soul of the earth, right? And so we got our little pie in the sky there. And so once we had that soul of the earth, then we can attract the soul of the earth body. And so when we got that, then we could manifest that into the physicality. And that became our destination, our default pathway manifestation to come to earth and enjoy heaven on earth. And then we find, well, there are some kind of limitations on this earth, and we find that they are made by man. And so we can summarize it this way. We can summarize conventional physics as being electricity, and man-made physics at the limits of the speed of light as nuclear science. Transcending the speed of light is the plasma science. And as such, it involves another energy, the ethos of the universe. It is this energy which drives the living life force on this planet, the living life force within us, and the living life force of the universe. And that involves morality, compassion, and courage to create and be part of creation. And so we have to transcend these limits. And so these limits are limited by the speed. So we see that we have an Earth light, and we can see Mars, and we can see other planets. And because we can see them, they all operate at the same speed. They're all operating within the physical speed of light. And so what we're talking about is heaven transcendence. And so we have to go at a higher speed. And so if even one field increases its speed of rotation, we find the elevation. And so that elevation is the defining point between materialization and dematerialization. So the materialization becomes the manifestation point of the physicality. But the manifestation point can be at any energy level. And this is why there are different reality dimensions. Before we go, I want to bring up a very important point with respect to the wind patterns around the world. And so we know that if we take the point at the equator and we say that that is 0 degrees, and we go up to the North Pole, that would be 90 degrees. And if we go from the North Pole to the other side of the equator, that's 180 degrees. And down to the South Pole is 270 degrees. And then we come back around and it's 360 degrees. But 360 degrees and 0 degrees is the same point, but not really. You see, the Earth is rotating. And so this measurement of going, in 90-degree increments doesn't just go with what we just described as the latitude, which goes from 0 to 30 to 60 to 90 degrees, but it also involves the longitude, which is the rotation, and it goes from east to west. And so these two fields are interacting. And so what we find is this anomaly where we have wind patterns at the polar sides. We call them the polar easterlies. So in other words, the wind pattern is coming from the east. And at the equator, we have the trade winds. And so they're also easterlies. And one's a northern easterly because of the northern hemisphere, and one's a southern easterly because it's part of the southern hemisphere. So they're actually flowing in the same direction, but coming from a different hemisphere and meeting in the center at the equator. And then in between, we have the westerlies, which are exactly 180 degrees in the opposite direction. And so these are the main wind patterns. And so we had trouble, coming to grips with the northern and southern hemispheres rotating in opposite directions. Well, if we were to slice up this pie along the 0 degrees, 30 degrees, and 60-degree levels, we find that the wind patterns are all also going in opposite directions. But the Earth is still rotating from east to west. So the thing that's kind of different here and is a bit of an anomaly is that when we measure speed, the formula is speed equals distance times time. Well, the distance at 60 degrees north is shorter than the distance at 30 degrees north. But the time of rotation is 1 day in both cases. So the time of rotation at 60 degrees is the same at 30 degrees, but the distance is shorter. The speed of the plasma fields is constant. It is equivalent to the speed of light. So what we're saying is the speed is constant, and doesn't matter where on this planet you are. You could be standing on the North Pole and just rotate in the spot. And you know what? It's going to take 1 day. The same time as it takes at the equator, 1 day. So the time is constant. Well, how can the speed be constant and the time be constant, but the distance be variable? And so this becomes the anomaly, and it's hard to explain in physicality, because if you only consider the rotation of the planet, then you're only accounting for a small portion, which is the rotating feedback of the rotating fields of the plasma feeding. So the equations should actually take into account the energy, because it is the energy manifestation of the inertia, which is a combination of the rotating fields of the northern and southern hemisphere in the plasmatic state. But the plasmatic state is a higher energy than the physical state. So therefore, that energy has to reduce to manifest in the physicality. But if it reduces, how does that affect the rotation? So clearly, if we say at the equator that the distance is the greatest, so we can say that the rotation and the speed of rotation, and we can determine what that is the speed equals the distance around the equator and the time that it took, and the time that it takes is 1 day. And so the speed of the rotation at 30 degrees is the physical distance times the time, which is 1 day, and the difference in that distance is the manifestation of the energy. Or it's the distance, the energy difference between the physical manifestation and the plasmatic manifestation. At 60 degrees, the distance is even shorter than at 30 degrees. And at the North Pole, it's even shorter than at 60 degrees. So this difference in the distance is what causes the spherical nature of the planet. And this difference accounts for the curvature of the planet. And so the energy in this distance accounts for the difference between the easterlies and the westerlies. And then the interaction of the easterlies and the westerlies create the weather patterns on this planet. And obviously, there are different speeds of rotation in all of these fields. So you have high wind, you have low wind, you have trade winds, you have doldrums. So there are differences, and the speed of rotation affects it. And then the speed of rotation also indicates the direction of the feeding. So the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. If the plasma state was the absolute higher strength and the physical state was the absolute lowest energy state, then there would be no feeding. So what you have to do is take into relationship another field. And this is the two-way street. So two fields make one. And so now there's a lot of excitement because there's another anomaly. We look at the rotation of the orbits around the sun, and all of the planets are kind of orbiting on the same plane. And so this is very exciting for the flat earthers because there's an anomaly here. There's a flat orbit versus a sphere, and we can see the spheres. And the spheres of the planet are orbiting on flat planes. So which is it? Is it flat or is it spherical? And so clearly, we can argue however we want and take into account whatever we want, and we can come to whatever conclusion we want. But the fact of the matter is, the sun comes up every day, and the earth goes around the sun. And the earth rotates on its axis, and it takes 1 day for a complete rotation. And the earth orbit around the sun takes 365 of those days, plus a bit. So the speed of rotation increases the field strength, but this speed can be reduced or increased. Unfortunately for us, we don't rotate as a physicality, but the fields within us do. And so depending on whether these fields are working properly affects our health. And so in addition to reducing or increasing these fields, we can create a field. But what we are witnessing is there's also possible to stop the rotation. And that stopping can be quite sudden. And we've seen that with electric motors. You can have this dynamic braking and you just stop on the dime. But, you know, if you drove your car that way, you'd be flying through the windshield every time you step on the brake. So what you're doing is you are stepping on the brakes gently to bring the car to a controlled stop. But if a deer crosses in your path and you're doing 100 kilometers an hour, then we do what you call is hit the binders. The binders is another word for hit the brakes hard. Hit the binders and stop suddenly. And that's what we're doing on this planet. We keep binding. We keep making binding choices at the expense of others and taking the energy from the lowest point. And this field strength is increasing because we are not understanding how the universe works. We don't even want to understand how the universe works. Well, it's a good thing the magnosphere understands, because the magnosphere is very gravitational and is at the core of the planet. And inside the magosphere is the core where the soul of the earth is. And so every day the sun comes up, and every day the planet is here. And it's because of those two that we are here. And so we see that, and this is not to scale. If we're looking at it from behind the sun, we can see there will be the sun, and then there's the earth, and then there's the moon, and there's us, and maybe some other little spaceships, and then the distance would be Mars. And so each of these represent a field that is rotating around the sun. And so these are all overlapping fields. And we can add fields. We can add ganses. We can add more spaceships. We can add things. We can create ideas. And these all become part of our satellite space or our spaceship space. And one of the spaces that we create is this peace stone. And it's a dynamic soul of the earth body. And we create that, and we give it more and more strength. And so, as such, it doesn't affect the rotation of the earth as a planet, but it does affect the field strength of the plasma. So all of us contributing to the peace stone increases the dynamic plasma state of this planet. And the dynamic plasma state of this planet interacts with the soul of the earth. Because that's how this planet got here. And remember, this planet got here before we did. You have to have a target if you're going to shoot at a target. And our target was Earth, and we arrived. And we know that because we're all here. And we're here for a purpose. And that purpose is to bring peace on this planet. And in the plasma, peace is the only way that we can keep that speed of rotation high. Because on this planet, we have a delay in consequences where we can avoid peace and not suffer the penalty immediately. Whereas in outer space, the effect is instantaneous. And so peace is the only way that we can keep the speed of rotation going and overcome man's existential crisis, which is to harvest the plasma energy of the plasma universe. Because what we have seen is that in our pursuit of happiness, we have failed. Because we've never launched a rocket into outer space. We've always launched a rocket into physical space, wherever that is. And we've ignored the obvious. And morality is missing. The education is limited. And all we are accounting for is what we can plunder. So the proof of concept is that we were born here. We weren't plundered here. And we were born here using an outer space system. And our souls came into our inner space. And we came to this earth space. And so we have decisions to make. We have choices to make. You know, is this just halfway trip? Or is this the trip? Or is this one purpose? And once we complete this purpose, we have another purpose. Because life has a purpose, and we are inherently peaceful. And that's the only way that we can bridge this physical, plasmatic reality into the reality dimension. Because this is where science meets the soul of man for peace. And as we extend to many of the countries around the planet, and they all rotate it the same way, they all take one day to come around, the field strength gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's gotten to the point where it's so stronger that we now have excitable visitors who actually want to be tourists in our little place. And tourists like to go to heaven. And that's where we are. And so we now have a new milestone. We are in the post-September 22nd, 2022 era, where we can make choices. And we understand that there is an outer space, that's the transmutation space. And there's an earth space. And the way things are going, it's a very cataclysmic space. Our inner space is seeking a graceful space, the graceful transition into outer space. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute teachings on plasma science. We're calling all Earth Space patriots. The World Peace Treaty is essential. Sign it. Use a pen. Use your heart. Use your soul. And understand that all of these are fields of interest and interacting fields, and they overlap. And the Earth has many overlapping fields. And this is all representative of life with freedom from boundaries. And the speed of rotation increases our understanding of the purpose of creation. So on an earthbound transformation, we're looking for physical and emotional uplifting and create the atmosphere that is necessary for the transmutation of the energy from that transparency point to that manifestation point. And as we see the Earth space trying to heal itself with these volcanoes, which are part of the healing process, the energy is connected to the nebulous points of the universal inner space of freedom. Our soul of the Earth feels the polar shift in man's morality. And the plasma science needs to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the outer space age. Thanks again, everybody, for allowing me to present. I hope you enjoy the journey.
Thank you, Alex, for presenting and posing more questions again. A simple plasma joke. What did one plasma say to the other? Can I take you out for a spin? We used to use that phraseology years ago with cars. Can I pick you up? Let's go out for a ride, or let's go out for a spin. But most plasmas are already spinning, I would think. But a field, as I understand, doesn't have that ability. It has a directional movement, and so doesn't the plasma. But with the plasma, it has that addition of a rotational factor as well as a directional factor. Does that make sense, Alex?
The rotational factor is mandatory because you can't have a field without energy. And to capture that energy, because you can't stop it, we think we can stop it. We fool ourselves in saying that we can stop it, but we can't stop it. And so we've noticed that with the, flight simulations where the plasma field actually stops. And the reason it stops is because it's engaging a different set of rules that affect the speed of rotation. And that is the morality. So the rotation is first. That creates your mag-grav condition. Then the motion comes in as a residue. The difference between your mag-grav position and another field position. And the thing that determines that other field position, of course, is the emotion of presence, the emotional field.
I'm just thinking of that because the example Mr. Keshe gives about the fields, well, we start with a plasma, but before the plasma, there's fields. And those fields create the plasma, and then 2 or 3 plasmas create a physics, and so on and so forth. So I thought it was that the fields just move directionally, and the plasma has directional and this rotational ability. just my understanding or the way I was thinking.
Yeah, but whether it's soul or emotional or a physical field, they all follow the same rules. So they are all fields of energy. It's just that in the physical state, it's the lowest energy state. So to manifest the physical state, it gives off the least amount of energy. But the truth is that it has the most amount of energy because it is gravitational. So to manifest that physicality, it appears now that we are the advanced species, but we're not alone. But the ability to manifest in the physicality is an advanced is a scientific advancement, and so we've taken advantage of that by being born. But we, in the process of being born, we've forgotten how we got here. So if we don't know how we got here, then how do we know how we can leave? And that's our problem. So we are not only don't know how to leave, but we are also not allowed to leave because of our conduct. We have taken advantage of the delay in consequences. In the plasma, you don't have as much of a delay in consequences. You do have a delay when you're making your cup of life, right? You make your cup of life today, and maybe as the field starts to get stronger and stronger, you start to see some GANs, maybe a few hours later, maybe a few days later. But, there's a delay because what we're doing is we're elevating the energy, but we're still in the physical state. So we now have a representation that you can have a different energy state within a range. And that range has been on this planet. Okay, well, can we go from the physical state to the plasma state? Well, yes, we can. However, we now have to engage a different set of rules. And if man's not moral, and he's not taking that into account, then you find that the plasma really starts to wobble. And, that deviation affects the manifestation. So the speed of rotation, as you can see, let's say, for instance, that if you're totally upright, you should have a lot of the energy that keeps you rotating properly on your axis. But if you're leaning over, then you find that, imagine you're leaning over from the North Pole towards the equator. Now you're losing energy. You're manifesting into the physical energy. We're not commenting if that's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying that we can actually see as the Earth is rotating, and actually explain as the Earth is rotating, that there's a change in the energy. Because clearly the guy at the North Pole is rotating at the same rate as the guy at the equator. It rotates one rotation every day. And the people who are living in the north are not any more dizzy than the people living on the equator. So to account for that difference, that spherical difference, there has to be a change in the manifestation, doesn't it?
Okay, well, the floor is open if anyone would like to open their mics. The new micro nano plasma reactors that we're intending to build, and I hope you're going to build one as well, Alex. We're not going to see any physical rotation, as I'm understanding it, correct? These are more static units, but there is a lot of rotation and interaction going on the field level. We won't see anything on the physicality level. It seems, or it appears to me, it'll just be like a static device, but it's way more than that. It obviously has these fields interacting, creating this scintillation, this rubbing or scratching, like you rub your hands together. So, but I don't think we'll see any sort of dynamic, what we used to spin, let's say balls or ping pong balls or those reactors. I don't know if there'll be any of that sort of interaction, just like with the reactors in the enhancement unit. They're not spinning, but the fields are interacting. So that takes a bit more finesse, I think, to play with this.
Okay, so this is a key point. If you have a gyroscope rotating on Earth, the gyroscope is rotating, the Earth is rotating, the solar system is rotating, right? And so those are all physical rotations. We are not rotating. We are rotating with the Earth, right? If we were rotating, you'd be walking down the street and, doing donuts all the way. It's we have an independence, okay, because we are the manifested field, and our manifested field is rotating in synchronicity with the Earth's rotation, and it doesn't matter where on the Earth we are rotating at the same speed, and that is, we're going, day by day. But if you were to, let's say, withdraw that gravitational field, that gravitational connection, and so I'm not talking about the maggrav condition, the balance between the magnetical and the gravitational. I'm saying if you transcend from all gravitational to all magnetical, you're out of here. You're out of here like a shot. There's nothing to keep you grounded. So it isn't an all or none. There is an in between. There's a tempered zone. And that tempered zone is this graceful zone that the Keshe Foundation is looking for, because every industrial revolution, and this is what we're talking about, industrial revolution, is going to cause massive unemployment. And we're trying to be graceful enough to cause massive employment at the same time. And so what appears like a disaster for some is a blessing for others. The thing is, the blessing for others represents the vast majority of people on this planet. But not only, it includes the planet, because the planet itself has a soul.
Okay. Let's see if thank you, Alex. Let's see if we can open it up a little bit. Would someone like to bring a topic, a question for Alex? Question for all of us? You'd consider the proton, Alex, the soul of the man, and the electron, the physicality of the man?
No, the physicality is the manifestation. The soul of the man is the gravitational, and the soul of the body, the soul of the man is the magnetical, because it's the universal traveler. The soul of the body is the gravitational. the manifestation of the interaction of those two creates a maggrav condition. The interaction of that maggrav with the Earth's condition, the Earth's environment, creates the physicality.
So here on Earth, we're rotating counterclockwise, are we? I mean, I can only be half wrong. But there are planets in the solar system rotating clockwise, aren't there? I was just wondering why these placements. Is it for stability, to keep everything in balance? And then if we were not rotating counterclockwise and we were rotating clockwise, would that change the whole environment of this planet in the solar system, or it couldn't exist?
What a great question. What a great question. Look.
Well, let's hear a great answer. No, just kidding. I'm just saying for, just surmising that, is it Venus that's rotating clockwise?
I'm not certain. It's either Mercury or Venus. But, you can clearly see that the plane, for the Saturn, Uranus and Neptune, they're kind of rotating on different planes, but they're still staying on the same orbit. So the point that I've been trying to make all along with these exercises is that we didn't come to Mars, okay? We came to Earth, okay?
But that's close enough, isn't it, Alex? From Mars to Earth. I mean, in galactic,
what did we miss?
It's not that far.
Well, it's not that far, but oh, well, sure. Go into outer space, my friend, and land in the wrong spot, and they say, "What are you doing here?" And you say, "Well, I'm close."
Right.
It's not where I wanted to go, but I'm close. Well, it's our target shooting is extremely accurate. We've sent over a couple hundred people into outer space. They've gone safely. They've arrived back safely. They went to wherever they wanted to go. We didn't predetermine where they were going, but they went with their soul. And I think you don't predetermine where you're going when you go to sleep, and you don't predetermine what you remember. But I think all of us are probably remembering more and more. And the thing that we really have to remember is that that's our own personal experience. So your experience is different from mine. So there's no point me interpreting your experience, because your experience is related to everything that you do. And so the thing that has that memory is your soul. Your soul will remember all of this, and it contributes to your evolution. And your evolution is a learning experience. And so one of the things that we've learned is that Earth is looking a lot better than Mars. I mean, if I had to make my choice over again and you give me this choice, well, you want to go to, you imagine you're the salesman and saying, oh, I have a trip to Jupiter. You want to go to Jupiter? It's a big planet. Well, big is nice, but I don't care about big. I'd like to go to someplace kind of heavenly, and you look at this beautiful blue planet and you say, my God, what a beautiful place. I'd like to go there. Boom, there you are. And you didn't come to Mars and say, oh, geez, I just missed by a little bit, relative to the universe. You have to be precise, because not only did you hit Earth, but you had to hit a certain spot on Earth. Imagine, as they say in the old days, you were born because of the glint in daddy's eye. Well, imagine if you got born and you were born in the glint of someone other daddy's eye. And you say, well, not your dad. It's just, the universe isn't chaotic. Man is chaotic.
So you're saying we came here and we somehow locked into this magnetical gravitational position and came
Exactly.
across the universe, and so then it should be traveling around the planet. This must be built into us or built into the soul, almost like the homing pigeon. So traveling around this planet or the solar system should be, well, if we know how to handle it, fairly simple.
Yeah, but the thing is we've altered the rules of the game, so we have a man-made game as opposed to the universal game. The universal game created all of these planets. If it was left up to us, I mean, let's say we're all racist. Oh, no, no, no. Get rid of Jupiter. Who needs Jupiter? That is such a big drag on this solar system. Let's get rid of it. That would be one of the dialogues, you'd be having. So you say, well, Jupiter does provide a purpose, and that purpose is located between Saturn and Mars. So who am I to decide that? I'm having enough trouble just deciding, what I'm going to talk about today. I can only work with that field strength. But I'll tell you what, Earth is a whole lot better because I'd have to do a whole lot more, on Mars. Like, why do you want to go to Mars? What is the attraction there? Give me a top 10 list as to why you want to go to Mars.
Well, there's probably a lot of beauties there that we're not even aware of.
Well,
it
there's a
sounds
lot of
like you're
beauties
talking.
here.
Huh?
There's a lot of beauties here.
Agree,
I,
and
I
we'll
don't
be
even
able
have
to
to.
explore them.
There's beautiful plants. There's beautiful animals. There's beautiful, paradises. Uh, like some people like snow, okay, and some people like the tropics, and some people like that variety, and it's nice to be able to go there and come back. Well, maybe that's one of the things. If we go to Mars and we see what a lousy place it is, and that's just my opinion from the pictures that I've seen. I mean, I'm not attracted to go there. It might give me more appreciation for the planet. But
Right.
I think there's enough damaging the planet here that we see that we better start appreciating our planet more and understand that we can do something about that. And since we're doing the damage on the lowest energy state, the cleanup needs to be on a higher energy state. And now that we're in the post-September 22nd era, we can now enlist the services of the higher energy state.
Well, it must be better than the moon because it's twice the cost to go there. So they must have some special accommodations, let's say. And I don't think it's the distance. Just a little joke there. I mean, 25 to 50 is double the amount. So, and I don't think you'll just appear there. I think there'll probably be some time of interaction, perhaps, maybe even days or longer. Of course, I don't know. I'm just surmising.
There is a quality difference, as you know. The moon is a satellite of the Earth, whereas Mars is a satellite of the sun. That's got to account for a lot of the difference in price.
Okay. Right, or maybe the soul of Mars just wants to extract a little more to visit. I don't know. No, none of the funds, of course, will be going to Mars. It won't be worth anything, but it will be recouped into the Keshe Foundation for their expenses and development and so on, and further development and so on.
Well, if you're a tightwad, then that's a good way to, draw people to moon. That would be one of the attractions of going to the moon. Well, it's half the price of going to Mars. Come on down.
Okay, would somebody like to ask Alex a serious question? Perhaps.
Yeah, turn off your mic there.
Alex, this is free. Um,
Good day to you.
Hello. It's evening here, almost night. But what I find so fascinating is that you remember the spiral that Keshe always draws, and we are on the other spectrum of the creator is the inside, the inner space of the spiral, and we are at the lowest outside. But that is probably the beauty, because we have in fact everything, every possibility in all these different fields until the creator. And that might be the reason why we are here on Earth, that we want to experience this. And it's not easy, but when we learn more about that, then we just have, and that's what also Ms. Keshe says, that we have to educate the universe, because we have chosen, I would say in my words, this outer plane of materialization, and therefore we get a direct feedback what is what the inner space of ourselves is reacting, or not reacting, but the consequences of our reaction in our inner space. So that is a little bit my take.
No, I agree with you totally. Is my mic on? Yeah. The observation you made is absolutely, in my opinion, perfect. The only one word that I would change is might. You're using as maybe your thought process is accurate. So your process has to be accurate, because your life has a purpose. So it's not purposeless. And so we're all looking for our purpose. But one of the things that help us in being more comfortable with our decisions is to look at, well, we had an array of possibilities, and looking at this array here, all what we call the solar system, I think we all made the best choice. So you're correct in saying, well, so the creator would be the gravitational, and we are the magnetical. But so what that means is that the creator is of the higher energy. But if the motion is us, is the manifestation of that motion is us, then we have to have more energy to be able to transmute from the physicality to the plasma field. And so we have to become more gravitational as well. Well, how can we become more gravitational if we want to become more magnetical? Well, the answer, of course, is that the field strength becomes manifest in the gravitational point, and the magnetical becomes the direction, the motion, the byproduct of the manifestation of the fields. This is very important to understand. We got into a bit of a problem last week with the anode cathode thing. And so it really boils down to the point of view. The anode was positive, the cathode was negative, but the being a negative means that you have more energy. And so you can do more. Being an anode means you can give more energy. So you can't give if you don't have it in the first place. So that's why the anode is positive. So it gives. So the action to give is going to give to the weaker. In the process of receiving, that weakness becomes enhanced. You see. So you've gone from, shall we say, a certain point of energy, and you've absorbed energy. Now you're in a higher energy. If you get enough of it to maintain that, you have to have a rotation. And in order to go to a higher energy state, you have to have a higher speed of rotation. And you have to be able to do that without getting dizzy. So the problem that we have here is that we were gifted with this trip to Earth using these techniques, and we have been delinquent in how we have used this gift. And so we're not allowed to continue until we change our ways. So it's in us. We have the knowledge. We have the capability. But, we keep delaying. And, just this simple concept of the speed of rotation. Back in 1974, it was physically demonstrated to some of the top engineers in the world. And it wasn't that they didn't understand it. They totally outright rejected it to the point where they made it a taboo subject. And yet, it is the fundamental principle of how advanced avionics works. I mean, that's how the universe, how the UFOs work. So this was in 1974 where the man was able to demonstrate in the physical state what the UFOs were doing, decades before that. So obviously there's a knowledge gap and there's a resistance. And that knowledge gap and resistance is detrimental to our existence on this planet. And because our existence then becomes compromised, the Earth space is also feeling that because we were welcome here. Now we've created an environment where, there's uncertainty. Are we welcome here? Well, one thing for sure, we're not welcome in outer space, not with this conduct. And can we change? Well, after 12,000 years, what would you say? Chances of us changing are kind of slim. And so we have to change the field strength. So instead of depending on the physical transformation, we need to work on the plasmatic transformation, not just at the emotional level, but go beyond on the soul level and understand that that soul level connects to the creator. So, welcome back to the universe, if you will. So you are 100% right in your comment there, Free. Thank you very much.
You say something about 1974. I didn't hear about that. What was going on then?
Oh, that was Eric Laithwaite made the presentation to the Royal Institute in England, and he was demonstrating gyroscopes. So they didn't believe him then, and it's it's too bad because as you say, seeing is believing, and he showed them physically, and they didn't believe it. What was it here? Just one moment. I'll pull the slide up again. Give me a second. Here we go. Maybe this is the slide that you didn't catch.
Indeed, I only got later in, so
Yeah.
didn't.
But this, what he showed here was physical. The systems he demonstrated were working, and they were working physically. There was no, well, it's a MAGRAV condition, and you have to manifest emotionally, and interact with this field and interact with that field, and you kind of have to think in multiple dimensions, the way we were constructed. No, this is purely man-made. This is purely physical, straight up physical. But as the one scientist said, well, this wasn't following generally accepted principles. Well, that's what constitutes innovation, isn't it? If everything that you do is only based on generally accepted principles, there would never be any innovation.
Well, I read that he's the father of maglev. Now China has a lot, and Japan has a lot benefited of that. Did they?
Well, certainly, and this is one of the reasons that I was commenting the other day and saying, we have this what do you call this romance with the electric vehicles, and I'm saying, well, it's not 1970. And when you look at Canada and the US, we don't have a high-speed rail system. And our continent is so broad, we could really use a high-speed rail system because there's a lot of space in between the cities, but we don't have one. And you say, well, why don't we have one? And if you look at the date, 1974 to 2022, that's 48 years, is it? What have we been doing in the meantime? So,
and only recently, or actually this week, I heard about the project to connect the world via the Bering Strait. There were plans to tunnel or to bridge that gap, and then we would have had the connection throughout the world in an easy way with this maglev rail system also probably. And then we would have connected the whole world with each other.
well, can you imagine, the maglev is physical, the magrav is plasmatic. And so the same principles apply, but at a higher order of magnitude. And now we have been advancing order of magnitude by order of magnitude. Each step is an order of magnitude. So now that if we operate on a physical basis and say that's the lowest, and if we just take a very, very simple 2 steps, let's go emotion, let's go soul, 2 steps, okay? That's 10 times 10. We're 100 times more efficient than the maglev. 100 times.
Yeah, and maybe we also can look at that Bering Strait, that to connect it plasmatically, and then we have the connection to throughout the whole world. Anyway, we have it, but there is also the physical. So sometimes it helps to physically imagine something.
Well, the whole thing has become redundant, hasn't it? So, if we were looking at a graceful change, and let's say this industrial revolution, and let's, do like the Chinese, do it every 5 years. So say, well, here's our target date, we'd like to get, let's say 25% of the industry converted to the new plasma science. Well, the way things are going, we're not getting that luxury. So you can tell me better than I can over here. I think you are having a severe energy crisis in Europe. So it's not just energy for heating, but it's energy for industry, which is driving the economy. So, you know, and then to pay for the heating, you're paying for heating that you can't get because there's no energy. So it doesn't even matter if you can pay for it, you can't get it. You know, no gas is no gas. You know, when you're out of gas, you're out of gas. It isn't, oh, I can't afford the gas. No, you don't have gas. So that to me is an existential crisis. Can you comment on that?
I can. I looked at my energy bill gas for last October. They were charging one of the charges, the bigger charge, was 88 cents per CCF, cubic feet. I don't know what the actual designation is. But this year, already it's $1.08 for the same item as in October of 2021. So that is close to a 20% increase right there. I think in Europe, they're doubling almost monthly. That was the report I had.
Well,
John.
you know, the good news, Mark, of course, is that the inflation rate has gone down. So instead of being, you know, exorbitant, it's 10% less than exorbitant this month. So it's not as exorbitant as it was last month, but it's still inflation. So, you know, the inflation rate in Europe, I think, is running right across the board at over 10% a month. Well, that's every month. So, you know, 10 times, we're what, in November, the 9th month of the year? So that's at least 90% increase in energy cost. Fried, can you update us on what the situation is there, or?
Well, my situation was that I had a certain amount, and I even got back in August, but the amount to pay forward is now the double.
Oh,
But
double, so
I got a substantial amount back from last year.
yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about the average person, like the, you know, it's a societal problem. It's not just a, you know,
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
and
we
is
get
it
some.
double?
Yeah, I think it's about double. Yes, and we get at least for a few months, we get some benefit from the municipality, and that is for low incomes. But it has, I normally wouldn't get it because I have little savings, but now I get it also part of it because it's independent of savings. So I get a substantial amount for 2 months to help with the high energy bills.
Well, this is great planning. Like I said, some countries, they plan 5 years in advance. You have to plan 3 months in advance.
Exactly.
Well, it's
You never know what the strings attached will be.
Oh, exactly. It's a sad state that we're in, and you know, when you look at, I mean, we're not dealing with incompetent people. You know, all of these people understand accounting. They understand technical things. You know, with the amount of money that is being tossed around is well, it's unbelievable. I can't even get my head around it. Okay, you know, I'm worried about day-to-day expenses. So and I'm not alone in that. And that's the whole point. So this is affecting the emotional stability of the society. And when you affect that, you're affecting the speed of rotation, because the field strength becomes diminished, because it's consumed. You're consumed with worry. In Germany, I believe that over 60,000 people became unemployed overnight because 8 factories shut down, and one of them was I remember was BASF, and their energy bill was $2.2 billion. And that may be a lot, that may not be a lot. It all depends on relative to how big the company is. Well, last year that bill was only 200 million. Oh, so the difference is 2 billion. Well, for 2 billion, they built a new factory in China, and goodbye 8,000 employees. It's been nice knowing you. And so now you have high quality staff who are looking for high quality jobs that are, fleeing. They're leaving the country. So there won't be any high paying jobs. Well, guess what? There's not going to be any low paying jobs as well, because the rest of the population has dominated those low paying jobs. I mean, you're looking at a total upheaval with respect to the economy. It's like a volcano. It's a volcano's erupting, and it's upsetting everybody. But why is that? With all the technology and capability that we have, and the history and education and the science, and we're suffering this way. I mean, I think this is, let's say, if I'm the head of the household and I'm operating this way, divorce, immediate. We've seen divorce for less, but this is catastrophic. Oh, well, we can't pay for the home, we can't pay for the food, we can't pay for the car, we can't pay for the hydro, we can't pay for the education. What kind of head of the household are you anyway? And I would say that's irresponsible. So and many people are that responsible. When they come confronted with these kinds of problems, then they go to the bar and get drunk, as if that helps the situation. That only weakens the field strength even more. So we have to be more mature and understand that maturity has nothing to do with age. Maturity has to do with field strength. It has to do with our understanding, our plasmatic understanding. The more plasmatic understanding that we have, the more mature we will be. And I'm speaking personally, I don't feel that I'm mature enough, because every time I go into a new discovery, all that discovery does is it creates more questions, and these questions keep coming up. And why didn't they come up in the first place? Because the questions that led to those questions weren't answered. Now that we answered some of those questions, well, more questions come up. Oh, well, if this, then that, and if this, then that. Yeah, so does that mean, that the field strength of Mars is the same as the field strength of Earth? No. Mars is on a different orbit. But Mars is within the same physicality as Earth. We can see Mars. And that's why it takes so long to get there, because we travel in the physicality. Well, I can travel there emotionally. I can see the pictures and I can imagine myself there. So that doesn't take a long time. Imagine now that you travel in outer space and you get there instantaneously. That's even faster than your emotional travel. Well, holy cow, I'd say that's an improvement. And that's what we're at. But, how do we get there? So, You can take an energy state, you can increase it or decrease it. And if it's physical, you can only increase it or decrease it so much by an order of magnitude. But if you're in a higher energy state, to increase it one state, that increase is many orders of magnitude. You can't increase it by just one order of magnitude. You have to increase it by many because it's at a higher energy state. You know, it's like going from the minor leagues. You know, we've got the World Cup starting today. All the top elite players are supposedly gathered in Qatar to play the World Cup. So these are top flight players. Well, they play differently from the way you and I would on a Sunday kick around, right? So, you know, when they are making a decision, they're taking more things into account in how they play, how they condition themselves, the situation in the game, the emotions, you know, the crowd noise, the referee, all these things have to be taken into consideration. You go around for a Sunday kick around and, you know, all you want to do is just have fun. Very, very simple. Almost like a kid. But that's not saying that kids can't be mature. Open up to the possibilities. Allow the field strength to come in and understand that our conduct affects the field strength. Well, if you want to be stronger, then you have to be morally conducted. And this is our dilemma. How fast can we mature? Thanks so much, Freed.
Well, we're going to have a chance with the energy blueprint to put it together and save ourselves in a way. I know he had announced, Mr. Kesh had announced that this will be coming up shortly. But as I said earlier, our success hasn't been overwhelming with the last system that was gifted to us. But we'll have to put our collective understanding together, I think, to make this happen, hopefully. It's already been produced by other people on the planet, and we'll see how detailed Mr. Kesh goes within this, or just discusses the generalities, and it's up to us to fill in the rest of it. But it does seem like time is of the essence in a way.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Oh, are you going to tell us you're used to dealing with 10% inflation a month, or is it even higher where you are?
Oh, yeah, well, I'm not going to repeat that. You're complaining about the gas. The damage of 10 kilograms of gas. It costs us here, what is it, about 330 euros, 10 kilogram bottle of gas. But that's beside the point. No, I was listening to Alex talking about he was standing on the North Pole and Earth gyrated counterclockwise. And then you said you're standing on the South Pole and it's also gyrating. It's really gyrating clockwise because you're standing upside down. Or do you stand on your head when you're on the South Pole?
Oh, so it depends on your point of view. You have to leave the North Pole and go to the South Pole and look at it. This is the thing.
That's right. You got to stand on your head to be able to see it the way you said.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, if you wonder, if you got a pension fund or something, come and live here. Everything is very much cheaper if you change your money on the black market.
Yeah, but
So,
John, the problem that we're having on this planet now is all encompassing. It isn't
yeah, it's
isolated in any one country.
we're living through unbelievable times. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, the real problem comes down to our awareness that we have choices. I found out when I was 40 years old. And the problem for me was that I couldn't believe that I could achieve the age of 40 and be so stupid. No, I mean, it doesn't matter, you know, how stupid I am today. I was like super stupid back then. But what was the, you know, the cause of that? And I'm being, you know, highly self-critical. And the reason I'm highly self-critical is because I had a medical problem in my family and it cost me a fortune. And so I didn't understand the rules of the game. And the rules for the game was that I was the toy and everybody was playing me. So until I became aware of what the rules of the game were, then I was struggling. And as soon as I found the new rules, then I could adapt properly. So this is the whole purpose of education and awareness, is to find out what is the correct thing. And until you find that correct thing, you've got to keep looking.
Very much so, yeah.
But we're at the point now where we don't have to look anymore because there has been a dramatic change in the rules of the game. So I was very happy to overcome the health problems. So, you know, let's say, you know, cancer was 8 weeks. Well, guess what? We can do that much faster now. So that's where the progress lies. The question for me is, you know, if I could process that in 8 weeks, well then, you know, it's been years since that happened. So there's a lot of 8 weeks in all those years. So we could have you know, eliminated that problem. It's just like there's a lettuce problem in North America. You know, a lot of restaurants are taking lettuce off the menu, you know, taking salads off the menu because there's a lettuce crisis. Well, lettuce grows in less than 8 weeks. So, you know, that's the bridge. That's the Bering Strait there, right? That Fried was talking about. That's the bridge. 8 weeks. For the sake of 8 weeks, you can start growing lettuce today, and in 8 weeks, you'll have a crop. And if you do it properly, the next day you'll have another crop. And you can harvest every day all throughout the year. We have that technology. So
And
why are we having a shortage?
yeah, if you use plasma water, it'll take half the time.
Oh, well, that's a bonus, right? So
Yep.
so you're really weakening their argument, you know, talking about the shortage. So if I'm saying 8 weeks, you're talking 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know, we have been waiting over a year for, you know, this reorganization. So there were what, 12, 13 4-week periods in that year.
You should listen to Johnny explaining the way he's seeding 120 hectares of wheat, and the difference between plasma seeds and an ordinary chemically treated seeds. It's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, this is the we've come to the point where we don't have to wait anymore. So we've been there and done that. So it's not gee whiz, good golly, Miss Molly. It's let's get going and let's start to bring peace on earth and prosperity to humanity. Great to hear your voice, John.
Same here.
Would anyone else like to bring something up at this point? Please feel free. There's no criticism. There's no judging. Whatever you'd like to open up, perhaps. Sounds like everyone's satisfied. Alex, is there more you'd like to go into?
What I'm
Or have they
realizing-
all fallen asleep?
No, I don't think they're sleeping.
No, they absolutely refuse to leave here unless they have surrogates listening in. And but anyway, all joking aside, I think everybody realizes how serious the subject matter is, and we've come to the point now where this is something you can't sit on the sidelines. There are no sidelines anymore. We're all in it. So there was a question, when did you decide to do this? So the answer is before you were born. That decision was made before you were born. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You're not here for no purpose. You are here for a purpose. You just have to, realize that there is a purpose to life, and and you're part of it, and that's the reward. That's a truly wonderful reward, and this planet is to benefit for that. So, if you want to know if you're fulfilling your purpose, all you have to do is ask yourself a question once in the morning and once in the evening. So in the morning, you ask yourself a question, how can I contribute today to the betterment of this planet? And then at the end of the day, you ask yourself, was this planet better in the evening than it was in the morning due to my presence? And so there's no quantity, right? And in fact, the only quality is the incremental benefit. So you are the judge of that because you have to work within your field strength. If you compare yourself to someone else, guaranteed you'll be disappointed. So, and that's not the game of life. Life is not a game in that regard. In life, we can play games, but that's not the game that, my field strength is better than your field strength. That's just a game. But what is your field strength in the evening compared to your field strength in the morning? Or let me put it another way. If you come to this meeting and you have no benefit, then that would be constituted as a waste of time. And so I don't believe that you believe that. And I respect that. So I try and do something that is, in my opinion, worthwhile and beneficial. And what I'm confessing to you is that I'm doing this for purely selfish reasons, because if I do something that's worthwhile for you, and that's questionable because I'm just transmitting, so you have to absorb it if you wish. I can't force it on you. I could just create that condition. But I created that condition and I absorbed that field strength from myself because it forces me to confront this situation. Because I'm like everybody else. I'd like to go to a bar and watch the soccer game, but this is more important. And I benefit from that. So it's part of my learning experience. And, I confessed that a long time ago, I was at the maximum of what I was taught. And I was fretting as to what was I going to do once I get to the maximum of what I know. And, I don't know much. And I find out, every time I learn something, I find out I know even less. But that's a relationship. That's a comparison. So there's more knowledge out there. So the potential increases. Well, that's great. You can't grow into a limitation. You can grow only into a potential, right? So a child will grow into an adult. But what does an adult grow into? Baggage, someone's baggage, someone's headache, someone's dependency. That's not an aspiration. So an adult has to grow into something. And this is the point. And if you're sitting in an old age home and the purpose of your life is to get up in the morning and go to the washroom and eat and go to sleep, I don't call that a life. And if that's all that you're taking into account, well, that's a sad state. But is there anything else that you can garner from that? So each of us has to make this decision. We have to make this decision. We cannot not make this decision because every day is an opportunity. And, we are being called into action. It's our planet. We came here willingly by the grace of our parents. And in honor of our parents, we came here to make this place a better place. And the only way that we can make this a better place is to do this as gracefully as we can. And this has to be a collective effort because that's what contributes to the field strength. If you want more energy, you have to increase the field strength to keep that energy. And that's what we're doing with the plasma dome. We understand that. We contribute to that. It is getting stronger. And you can see that because we are exchanging our perceived desperation for someone else's newfound desperation. And we're seeing it. And it's sad to see. And we can help out with that by reconnecting the souls. Because the delinquency and misconduct that we have on our planet is manifest from the disconnection of our souls. So how can you disconnect the soul? You don't disconnect the soul from the physicality. You disconnect the soul of the man from the soul of the body. Because the soul of the body governs the soul, the body, or the body of physicality. So if we reconnect that, and we have that technology now, we, and I say we as man space, but how about universal community space? And if they do or if they don't is actually a moot point. By extension, we have it, they have it by extension. So that's a done deal. Now it's a matter of implementation. And if they didn't have it, what they did have was the morality. So that for them is a done deal. It's for us to relearn that. And it's a very simple thing to do. You have to make that choice. And not all of us are in an ideal situation where we can extricate ourselves from that particular problem. So this is the challenge, and this is where it's going to take time to do that. And if we don't have that time, then the events are going to be cataclysmic. So the only way that we can overcome these, shall we say, obstacles is to be cataclysmic. Elevate everybody right across the board. I have no choice.
Anyone else have something they'd like to bring up? Alex, are you finished or there was more?
Over to you, Mark. Thanks.
Well, I guess we're going to see some things in the next 60 to 90 days. I don't want to see one person freeze to death in Europe, and if we can transmute one, we can transmute all of them if need be, if that's their choice to go. I know Mr. Kesh said if they knew about the foundation and understood a little bit about the technology, they could be moved out of Europe into a more warmer or a choice of a place that they wanted to be in. But maybe there'll be another way to resolve this, at least in the interim, where the gas will be provided or something along that line. And even if we push it back to next year or whatever, that, but this is going to go on for a little while, I think, that we actually have the physical units ready for release. I wouldn't mind doing that either, but I don't want to see, I think there's like indicated 400 million people are in the zone. And the winter is fast approaching. So hopefully we can build these things. And I mean, I would give up all my time just to build them on a regular basis every day. If it could help someone else in another part, help himself, but help someone else as well. So we'll see. Hopefully this is going to be a better understanding than the Magrev systems that were gifted to us, let's say. Anyone else want to bring something else up? If not, I'm going to play the privilege of becoming a satellite soul. And again, Mr. Kesh is indicating we need more people involved, and especially on the mobile wellness or the cosmic ray farms, these wellness centers. I don't know what the overall plan is, but whatever it is, it's beautiful and it's for the elevation of all souls. And again, we're not the special one. We think we're special, but it has to do with all the other souls that have been created here and throughout the universe, as I understand it.
See, that's a great point, Mark. So there is no feeling of inferiority allowed in this transformation, because you know, we all were born, so we all have this inherent capability, right? There's not an exclusive club. There's no club to join, or there's no, you know, admission ticket. We are all automatically included. So it's just a matter for us to change our awareness and change our outlook and understand that the soul is what's feeding the physicality, and the physicality manifests from what the soul is feeding. And we have to incorporate that into our life, and not just at, you know, noon or 6 o'clock, but 24 hours a day. And that's how long it takes to go around this planet in one rotation, one day. So it's all of us together, and the amount of knowledge, the detail, you know, I mean, who cares? What you care about is what's in your heart and what's in your soul. And so on that basis, I want to thank everybody for sharing the time with me today and allowing me to present. And Mark, again, a great job in putting together this. It's a fantastic contribution, and to all the souls participating today, thank you very much, and let's have a great week.
Okay, anyone else holding something back that they thought they would like to release and share at this point? Okay, so you'll be able to recommend a process that people are not aware of if they've exhausted all their other avenues. I know some people do go into experimental testing, or if there's a new product coming out from the pharma, but this is way beyond that. You'll be able to share and let them know where they can receive some sort of processing or balancing or what have we there. And I think it's again, as Erm said, the email is health@spaceshipinstitute.org. So you can email there. And that was in the workshop as well. You can see that. So this is the point of connection to overcome whatever conditions, at least some of the very main ones. And I know there are millions of people when you total up all the different people suffering from Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and all the other depression, all the other conditions that were named in this last workshop, that there is a place to find relief from that condition, which is a blessing just alone in itself, even for the family members who also have to bear the burden or the pain or the sorrow of seeing someone you love go through such a condition, when it can be simply changed through processing, or perhaps a magnetic field that will interact and balance what's needed in this space gap. Anyone else?
Mark, may I add something, please?
Oh, add as much as you'd like, Alex.
Just I was looking at the schedule here, and so today's topic was speed of rotation, and this was the 5th week in this particular 6-part series. So I made up my decision. It wasn't etched in stone, but I haven't made any changes. This was a subject that I was planning on talking about, and that was done 5 weeks ago. You may find this hard to believe, but I never heard of Eric Laithwaite until yesterday. And I was actually quite astounded. And the thing was that it confirmed for me the question, you know, what happened to all these high-speed trains and stuff like that. So, you know, through my research yesterday, I got all those answers. And I've had these questions for years and years, but it wasn't that much of a priority. But what I want to draw attention to is the fact that the speed of rotation was a fundamental thing of the demonstration that he did in 1974 with respect to the gyroscope, because the gyroscope was rotating at a very fast rate. So we were talking like around 25,000 cycles per minute, which is pretty fast for objects that were that large. But I incorporated that into today's session. And so what I want to reference is how if I were to etch this session in its physicality, I would have not had the opportunity to do that. So I had an opportunity to prepare my class, and I do that so that I can stay as current as possible. But I wasn't looking for that reference. It just came to me thanks to the AI logarithm on YouTube. So, just things work in mysterious ways when you allow things to happen. And you need to be grateful, that it does happen. But if you don't provide the opportunity for that to manifest, then it's never going to manifest. So I try to keep an open spot for eventualities like that. And I find it pretty remarkable that I headed today's class on a subject that was so insightful and so significant with respect to what Mr. Lathwaite had done. And if you're asking, has anything happened in the last 50 years to move the technology further? Yes, it's called the Keshe Foundation. Thank you all. Talk to you next week.
Right, now this fellow, Lathwaite, he was from Canada? Is that correct? Yes.
No, he was British. He was
Okay.
a professor at Imperial College. He was born in England, and he passed away in England, actually. The irony of the story, just to finish off, is that he had received a contract from NASA, and 3 weeks later he passed away. So he never got a chance to fulfill that. Never got a chance to fulfill the contract with NASA.
Yeah, it was interesting. I went to school with a girl named April Garthwaite, and I said, "Gee, that's a very different name." And this fellow had a Lathwaite, and all you need to do is change 2 letters, and it works from Garthwaite to Lathwaite.
Well, I hope your memories are pleasant.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, we're having too much fun.
Okay, well, the fun has just begun, so I hope you can handle the rest of it, Alex. And I think we will start to see a lot of all these frowns and this disparaging time that so many people are going through, seeing so many obstacles in front of them. All these frowns and this dismay will be turned into smiles, happiness, and joy, with the fields of comfort and peace provided to everyone. And that's what we'll be able to do, I believe, because it's sorely needed, and it's even more needed as winter approaches.